Welcome to episode 81 of the Card Diary by Hobby S. Thompson. I am your host, Denny Cards, and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I am so glad that you are here. This is going to be my first podcast episode, a full one, because the last two were kind of like maybe 5-10 minutes of an intro and then just kind of things that I recorded in the past, but I am currently recording this. We are heading into the week of the National in Cleveland 2024. I wonder if some of you will be listening to this as you travel to Cleveland. And I hope that I keep you entertained for, I don't know, maybe I'll go 30 minutes. I haven't fully decided. I don't really time these out. I haven't asked Siri to time me or set a timer or anything like that. Of course, as I say her name, my phone kind of lights up. So, the episode title for this that I plan to do, and this is going to be the structure for this episode, is Five Things I Learned from Hosting a Moderately Successful Hobby Podcast. This is definitely my longest episode title. Well, maybe it's not, but because once you add in people's names and their titles and things like that, but there's a lot to unpack from that one statement. So, first thing is like, what even is a podcast? Because I do plan, because there is a video component to this, I do plan to upload the video and audio for this up on YouTube, which I am still trying to do because I am bigger on Instagram and the hobby, but not so much in YouTube and other platforms or other social media, apps. But a podcast, it's like the definition of pizza, or I know there's a big debate on the internet about, what is a hot dog a sandwich? Like, what is the definition of a podcast? Because I hear so many people, not, and this isn't just in the hobby, it's outside of the hobby as well. It's like, oh, I have a podcast or I do a podcast, and it's like, what does that even look like? Because I'm watching you on YouTube, right? Some of you may be watching this on YouTube. And for the, I guess, if you want to call Wikipedia the official dictionary of the world, but I am going to read the first paragraph because there's so much more. There's like history, etymology, and all this stuff I'm not going to get into. But the first paragraph in Wikipedia says, a podcast is a program made available in digital format for download over the internet. For example, an episodic series of digital audio files that users can download to a personal device to listen to at a time of their choosing. Podcasts are primarily an audio medium, but some distribute in video, either as their primary content or as a supplement to audio, popularized in recent years by video platform YouTube. So, the main thing I take away from there is, download, right? So unless you have YouTube Premium, you're likely just, streaming this on, or not streaming, but it's to download videos from YouTube. I think you need YouTube Premium, which I'm still holding strong on not having. I tried it for a little bit, but I'm like $20 a month just seemed a little bit cost prohibitive, although I can afford it, but like StreamYard is $20 a month, and I have that subscription. But maybe it would be good for me to get YouTube Premium, if anything, to just stop those pesky whatnot ads. It's like, I don't want these ads, and they are incessant. They happen every 5 minutes, and it's there could be a YouTuber who is railing against whatnot and just saying all the bad things and all the vices and all the terrible things about whatnot, and then they'll just run the ad for whatnot. So I think that's just hilarious. That's, I don't think it's the creator's choice. That's just what they do. The algorithm and the marketing and advertising of YouTube. But yeah, if you found me on Spotify or Apple, which I know about 2/3 of you listen to me on Apple, you will be downloading it, I guess, and then you can listen to it at a time of your choosing. So that's the streaming aspect, which we know how everything is being consumed nowadays. It's just at the time you want. We're not tethered to must see TV, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central for TGI Friday, and you know uh, even really good shows nowadays are just you can binge watch them if they release them all at one time, which I think a lot of people say has resulted in the erosion of water cooler talk, and not the not so great to say the erosion of society, but there were these seminal moments that I remember as a kid too, like for instance, like the Seinfeld finale when we all consumed it at the same time, or and if you didn't, like you were behind in school, um when kids were talking about it. And so it has kind of eroded that kind of like shared timing of things, which is, I guess, what we now derive from, say, like news events when we all find out at the same time. But yeah, it's a time of their choosing. I think a lot of you, or at least, I think with my download, with my numbers, which we'll get to the moderately successful aspect of this, is that it's a decent amount of you downloaded in the first day. And when I say decent amount, I think maybe a third of you, and then the other 2/3 download within a week or something like that, and then the numbers just peter off after that. And then the next thing in this paragraph is that it's a primarily an audio medium, and some distribute, in video either as the primary content or as a supplement to audio. And so I think that's the part where it's like, I am recording video via StreamYard, and the reason I pay that $20 a month for StreamYard is to have a library, or kind of like it all stored. But I guess I could just download it onto my laptop and maybe divert that money towards more grading of cards or YouTube Premium. So I stop listening to those whatnot ads. But for me, I really love audio fidelity. This is why I have my Blue Yeti microphone. Although if I was dabbling in high end cards and making a lot of money in the hobby, I would likely have a Shure microphone or a Rode microphone. I don't even know if that's how you say it. Which, by the way, I've recently found out that the thing you see on people's SUVs, Thule, I always thought it was Thule, but apparently it's Thule. I don't even know if that's right, but this is what, like, I think people who have a lot more money, that it's almost like you get to you're like an insider with knowing how certain things are pronounced. But anyway, um, so podcast. So I love the audio format. That's going to be the main thing that I do. But of course, when I record with a guest, it's not audio only; it's video. We do, again, I use StreamYard. Although I guess I could use Zoom like other people do. But I love a good listening. No, yeah, like a good listening experience. Like, I know there are some people who record podcasts without the microphone, or without without just kind of like a better audio experience, and sometimes it does bother me. But again, if the content is really good, you'll listen to anything, right? So um what's the next thing I wanted to talk about within the first thing of the five things? It's what is a podcast? Then what is it? What do I mean by moderately successful? Because from a this is where things differ from the hobby and non-hobby. I think outside of the hobby, you hear about these podcasts who have millions of downloads and listeners and followers, and I think the hobby, we tend to make things bigger than they are, meaning that we say, oh my gosh, this person has 100,000 followers or 50,000 followers, and that's huge. And it's like, when you compare those numbers to people outside of the hobby who are content creators or influencers, it pales in comparison, right? And same thing with podcasts. I'm not someone who checks Chartable, which is one uh, podcast measuring website. I don't check it often. There have been a handful of times when when I dipped into the top 200, especially for, say, Canada, which is awesome, but also the United States. I think that if you're consistent and you do it often and you really, you put the time in, which will be one of the next of the five things, is that consistency. you can climb the podcast charts, so to speak. But when I think about success, it's not really so much the metrics, which is important. I will just straight up divulge that when I look at my podcast numbers, there hasn't been a lot of growth. Again, I didn't put as much time into it in the last 6 months as I have in the first 6 months. I guess this kind of serves as my 1 year anniversary doing this podcast too, because I didn't record it in May and June since it's now July. But in the past year, I was pretty steady. I think a lot of my following, or not a lot of my following, but I can attribute a decent number of followers, listeners coming from followings from Instagram. Just people who are curious, like, what is this all about? And I started doing these chapters and I started having guests on. And I think there were definitely some guests who are more, maybe people wanted to listen to more than others. But to me, I think I averaged or topped out at around 300 listeners per episode. And I hit over 5,000 plays, and this is just Spotify, 5,000 plays. So like 15,000 plays over the 80 episodes. I don't even know if that number, if those numbers work out right. But again, I'm talking about topping out and like averaging, and not like no, there's like that difference between, what is it, the mean and the mode and the median and all that stuff. I'm not getting into all that right now, but um yeah, I'm proud of what I've done so far with the podcast. Again, it's more of like I really enjoy it. I think I can definitely grow and get better. And when I say grow, I don't mean numbers wise, but just my skills, my mic skills, my interviewing skills, just producing a better podcast. These are things that I want to try to do in this next year of this podcast. And so I think that if you really look at the metrics, I mean, I say moderately successful because ultimately I am happy with what I've done so far, especially considering that a year ago, a year plus, this didn't exist. But I can also be my own biggest critic, which is something that I am working on. I can really be hard on myself sometimes. And so that's why I just say moderately successful. But also, from the grand scheme of things in the hobby podcast landscape, I mean, you take away the Jeff Wilson show and Sports Card Investor and other podcasts. I mean, could you even call, like, say, Sports Card Radio a podcast because they do like a live stream on YouTube? But other than those two, and maybe two or three more, maybe including like Sports Cards Nonsense and the Hobby with Cage, there aren't that many, you know, highly downloaded and listened to podcasts. Oh, I should also say, I will give a shout out to a couple of more that come to mind. Stacking Slabs and Wax Museum podcast, because those are two that I listened to really early on when I came back into the hobby 2 years ago. And then, of course, for those who have listened to me for a while, you know that I really did binge and like the Sports Card Therapist podcast, which is no longer there. And also, there's Cards to the Moon. I could go on and on. I feel so bad if I leave anyone behind because I don't have like notes in front of me. Yeah, here's my top 10 podcasts that I listen to. No, I don't have that. But yeah, ultimately, I'm happy with what I produced. But one of the first thing I learned about hosting is, I guess that you have to just start. If you want to do it, you have to start from zero and you have to be consistent. And that is where I started lagging. Again, in the second half of this of I guess first half 2024, but the second half of my first year of doing podcasting, I just got burnt out. I felt like I was running a marathon. I was sprinting a marathon, and the charts and the rankings and the metrics, the followers. Now I'm blending in social media and the hobby, but it just all felt like a rat race, and I just got burnt out, I think. So the first thing is, you just have if you want to do one, you just have to do it. There are a decent number of people in the hobby that I've talked to who are content creators or like, I want to do a podcast or I'm going to do a podcast. And it's always I want to or I'm going to. It's and they say this for weeks, for months, and some have asked me for help, and once I tell them my StreamYard is $20 a month, some of them bristle and they don't want to do it anymore. Uh, and you don't need to do StreamYard, right? That was just my choice. There are people who don't even want to spend $100 on a Blue Yeti mic. They want to spend $20 or $0, and you can do that. You just have to figure out, your podcast platform of choice, and you have to just start. Which brings me to the second one of the five things I learned, which is you truly are beholden to the podcasting platform of choice, and you really are tethered, and you have to adhere to any changes that they make. Avid or devoted listeners of this podcast know I have intro music, outro music, sometimes sprinkled in transition music. It's all gone. Spotify for podcasters, they revamped it. They've switched to Riverside. I don't know how to use Riverside. I feel like if I could put the time in to learn it, it would be good. But I've scoured Reddit forums, subreddit forums about this change, and there's so many people who are unhappy because it's not just the music. There's other features that went into this, but they it's all gone. And you are, as someone who uses Spotify for podcasters, which used to be Anchor. Again, and they stopped using Anchor, and then what is it, Anchor.fm or something like that. And then now Riverside, it's you are really beholden to the podcasting platform of choice. There's also Podbean. There's also like one or two that, well, I mean, there's many more than one or two, but I can't think of all of them. But um, you know, you really have to do your research, and maybe that's where people get stuck in wanting to do a podcast, is just kind of like, well, there's so many choices and I don't know what to do. But I think just getting one, talking to your hobby friends and really just starting, and just make one or two throwaway episodes. Just record. Sometimes that's the best way to just start, is just kind of you know do, do dry runs or practice rounds or whatever it is. And then uh man, I feel like I should take a break here, and I have no sponsors or anything to cut in between. But let me just take a break. I'm about at the 17-minute mark, and no transition music, no sponsor read, nothing. But I'll be right back. Okay, I am back. And now, so just to recap the first two things, you just have to start. I think, starting from zero is daunting, and it's really difficult, and it can seem there can be a lot of kind of worries or concerns, but I'm just so glad that I just started, because it's something that I really enjoy. So, the second thing is you are beholden to the podcast platform of choice, and just do your due diligence and talk to people and research and figure out, how much you would want to put into it, time wise, money wise. And then, if you start off and then they start making changes, like, just a handful of episodes in, then you should be okay. But if you're 80 episodes in and you rely on the music or the little things, the little bells and whistles that the platform gives you, you are out of luck if they get rid of it. So, number three, and what I realized is this kind of is turning into a chapter about podcasting, kind of like my other chapter episodes. And that structure can kind of be stifling, but I'll get to that in a moment. But this third thing is basically be comfortable and be focused. And there's many ways, and I'm learning different things too. But the three things that came to my mind with this concept, or this third point of being comfortable and focused, is having your phone on silent, um, staying hydrated, sitting and having a good, comfortable, non-squeaky chair. I have had multiple what am I trying to say? Sitting apparatuses because they weren't just chairs. I had chairs and I had like an ottoman. Right now, actually, I'm standing. That might be something that I do going forward. But I um I kind of burped. I hope you didn't hear that. But if you're comfortable and focused, which clearly I am kind of losing my focus right now, but it allows you, especially in a guest episode, it allows you to really listen to what the guest is saying, and you can have good follow up questions, and you can have just a stronger, I guess, rapport with with the guest. So that's my third one. And again, these are just not you have tos, but or you shoulds, but more of like what's I feel like has worked for me, and things that I've learned, things that I learned made me better or made me uh just want to do this more. So number four, and so these next ones are really in a way more specific to this particular podcast, the Card Diary by Hobby S. Thompson aspect and the theme, but there are some global lessons that can be learned from this. Okay, so the first, or I guess 4A, is that it not you must or you need or and all that or you should, but what I've learned is having a hook or a theme or something to really grab people's attentions is important, especially in this attention economy. I've quoted this Jay-Z lyric many times, and I'll say it again. You could be listening to any podcast in the world, yet you're here with me. That's paraphrased, not a direct quote. He never said that. But he said, you could be listening to you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. So I think that it's unfair sometimes that you have almost like a judging a book by its cover, but having a good cover art for your podcast, having something that grabs people's attention is helpful. And then once you have people in, it's like, it's not just the book cover, but the book itself. It has to be good. So just having something to hook people. So my hook was this whole try everything, here are the different things that I've tried, and here's what I've learned from them. And then I would have actual experts or guests come by and tell me, what works for them. And so I learn from them. So when I do that, I that was my hook. That was my theme. And I think a lot of people did appreciate that structure, that foundation, if you will. And in doing that, I what I really realized is what I like doing and what I don't like doing. And just because I don't like doing something doesn't mean that I'll stop. For instance, I don't really think I like being a dealer or vendor in a card show. I have found that to be it's hard in many ways. And I didn't really write notes down for this, but let me just kind of riff here and just say for me, sitting for a long period of time is brutal. I already do that in like that the 9 to 5 and all that, so I don't want to do that. I don't like doing that. I do kind of want to walk around. It allows me to be more flexible, or allows me to be more nimble or fluid with the card show itself. Secondly, and even if you don't just sit the whole time and you're standing, you have to be there at your table, unless you have a table partner, or if you have, if you have to go to the restroom and you ask someone else to look over your stuff. And unless you've done shows many times, that's you may not have the that rapport, and you're trusting people who are like complete strangers. So okay, actually, one more break. Okay, so this whole idea of having inventory, I don't it's one of those words like content creation or influencer. It does make me cringe. Inventory, when you have I understand what the term is, and it's a phrase or it's a term of art, and it's in our hobby, but to me these cards are, some of them are so beautiful. They're like pieces of art. They're amazing. They invoke, certain cards more than others, of course, but they invoke something in me. And to just say their inventory almost in a way uh dehumanizes the cards, which are already not human. But I hope you get what I mean. What I it's just it makes them seem more like, I don't know, something you buy at a grocery store, right? So to me, I don't mind selling online. I think I could become a better vendor or dealer. I think that what I have a hard time with, which I think a lot of others do, who just aren't well versed at it or want to get better at it, is that real time negotiation. That when someone's, and especially if you're going against someone who's really good at negotiating, it's almost like they're selling a car or buying a car. They are not leaving that lot without a car, and they will do everything they can to make sure that deal happens. And they just have all the tricks and the tips and they have, it's almost like a really good basketball player who has like all these dribble moves and crossovers and spins and fakes and hezi and euro step. It's They have a tool bag. They have a really good array of um, sayings or phrases or moves in order to make a deal happen. And sometimes I find myself kind of like, in a way, not tricked, but like flabbergasted or like, impressed and pressured or influenced to either buy or sell or something like that. So, um, online, you just take all the time you need in a way, unless someone is really unless you're DMing with someone or you don't want to take forever because you could definitely let a deal slip through your fingers. But I think that almost in a way that the screens allow this separation, and social media is bad in so many ways, but it does allow for you to not see the other side in a transaction, especially if you've never met them and you've never made a deal with them, to kind of in a way dehumanize them. But you can make a deal in a card show with a stranger you've never met, and that could become like a really good future trading partner, and that's how you establish your reputation within your local card community. So I yeah, I got some flack for not pricing my cards out because I was sick before a card show. I had paid the fee, and I miss it and I don't show up at all, or I try to go and rushed away and try to make it. And people, I guess, were not happy. Well, very few people, but there are some people who are just bristling at that fact. Again, we're human. We make mistakes, and also we get sick. So but yeah, going forward, I would love to have everything priced, everything ready, have my inventory sheet, know how much I am into each card, how much I can make or lose, and what my wiggle room is. That's all great. It just, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of work. Um, Everything in the hobby is a lot of time, a lot of work. If you want to grade well, if you want to really take your time. You can do a really rushed, half-assed job in submitting to your grading company of choice. But if you are trying to flip and you need those PSA 10s, because I guess we're currently in a landscape where PSA 9s are going for as much as or as little as raw cards, which is just wild to me for ultra modern, of course. But it's to me, it's like if you put in the time and you make it into almost like a craft. I actually like The thing I like about grading cards is when you put a lot of time into looking at the card. And I think it's kind of silly a little bit because you are looking at the edges, the corners, the centering. You're almost looking at the periphery of the card. You're not looking at the actual like middle of the card, which is where the eye really immediately attracts to when you look at a card. You don't immediately look at a card and go, let me see the corners. But when you're grading or when you have, a card that you want to submit for grading, you are immediately trying to look at the fringes or the outlier. What am I trying to say? The periphery. But I know cleaning's controversial, but when you're cleaning a card, you're giving love to a card. You're really putting in the time and you're investing time into that. It's like a craft. So I think that I like grading. I It's almost like an exam. You're like you're you're taking an exam, and then when you get your grades, literally and figuratively, like you're getting your A's and your B's and all that. And as someone who has who has Asian parents, you always have to get A's. You always have to get PSA 10s, right? So everything has to gem in. Otherwise, why are you submitting it in the first place? But I like grading, I like podcasting, I like I don't know how much I like the flipping. It's just weird to me to especially if you're, buying or if you're selling to a friend, to be like, "Yeah, I wanna make a profit off of you. Like, I bought this car for cheaper, but I'm not gonna give it to you at that price. I need to make a little bit of I need to wet my beak. I need to make some money off this. So, buy it for 10% more than what I paid for it. It's just kind of, you could do that. I think it's easier to do with people you don't know, but again, like I, I bristle at that. What happened in the last 30 minutes in which I am charging a higher price and I want to win. I want to make a profit off this card. I just think that's a little silly sometimes, but that is, of course, a lot of the hobby is that flipping culture, which really is, I mean, I don't know if it's here to stay, but it's there. The other thing that is here to stay is breaking. I've tried breaking, not a fan of it, not a fan of being a breaker. Myself, that one I did find, you have to sit for a long time. There's a lot of downtime, a lot of slow time, unless you're constantly running auctions or constantly, transacting and talking to a very big chat room. But there are times when it can be just really brutal and you're just it's like pulling teeth and you're just trying to figure out what to do to make time go faster or to fill the break or not lose your shirt because of course you could fill a break, just sell every spot at $1 and it goes for $1. Everyone's going to buy into your breaks, but it's trying to make a profit doing it while being a breaker. I think that's hard. um whether well, I was gonna say it's hard if you're like an independent breaker, right? Because the profit and losses are all your own. If you work for a breaking company, which I also kind of did, I worked on like I guess like store credit instead of like kind of like this wage or payroll thing. But it was kind of like you are limited or you're capped at what your losses and profit can be. It's just you're paid a certain hourly wage, and all the profit and losses is to the company. So, um, and there are some people, their bonuses and people who can move a lot of products. It's just that salesman part that I think just doesn't come natural to me. I just I know there's some people who do it well and are not snake oil salesmen. They're just really good at it. But there's just this part of being trying to sell people on something that just doesn't really appeal to me that much. So I don't like being a breaker. So I won't get into everything that I like doing and not doing. I mean, I think we all love buying cards. I mean, that's just if you had a money tree, just buy everything in sight. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, so the hook or theme, that's what I meant to talk about with this one, is if you want to have uh, if you want to set yourself up for success, I think having a theme or hook is important because everyone can just turn on a mic and talk, but why should people talk? What is there value? Is there entertainment? Is there information? What are you providing the listener? I mean, some people may say this is not any of that. It's not informative or entertaining. But anyway, we'll move on. The 4B, in a way, is that what I've learned from this podcast is when you get really good at one of these things that I was talking about breaking, grading, selling, selling online, having an eBay store, whatever it is, podcasting, when you get better and better, and you don't have to be like at the top of your class at the top or anything like that, but I'm just saying as you get better and as you have these peers, the competition, you really do start becoming a threat to those who are not to everyone, but the people who are your peers and the people who are comparing themselves to you, or maybe you're comparing yourself to them. You become a threat to them because you're taking away, in a way, like their market share. But not everyone. I think it's mostly the people who are unsure of themselves or they're just less self assured or self confident. And also people who, in general, have a like a scarcity mentality. Um, as someone who grew up in a lower income household with immigrant parents, I'm talking about myself. and myself, being an immigrant, I know this scarcity mentality. It is riddled with anxiety, paranoia, hoarding. I mean, let's talk about collecting as hoarding, but it's very much this idea of there's just a certain amount in a pie. It's an 8-inch pie plate, and you are taking away my market share. You're taking away from my pie. And instead of thinking that there's enough for everyone to eat, or that we could have a 10-inch pie or a 12-inch pie, it's just a sense of whatever you're eating or whatever you're doing is taken away from me. There's also that with being a content creator, people who are very selfish, or kind of like, oh, you have more attention in this attention economy, and so I have to dip your bucket, or I'm going to talk negatively about you. This is this happens so much. It really does. Instead of people just kind of being like, we are in this together and we're making content for other people, we kind of bicker and fight and talk behind each other's backs. I will very much admit that I've gotten into that a little bit, and I didn't like that. I That's part of why I think I need to take a break. Is just it was just getting to be too much. But um, I think increasing the pie and not having that scarcity mentality is so important, and that's not just a hobby thing. That's just like in life. I know that I strive to have that abundance mentality, which is the opposite of the scarcity mentality. It's like when my kids fight over something, I'm like, why are you guys fighting over this thing? Like, there's enough to go around. Like, there's, but of course, kids, it's different, and we definitely have man children, or man babies in the hobby, but it's more of like this idea of there's enough for everyone. Let's not It's not a zero sum game. It's not a, if you something good happens to you, it means that it's bad for me. It's just more of like, let's just try to do better, with each other, and understand that we're all in this together. But it's very aspirational. I totally understand, but that is my 4B of the 5 things, and I'll be right back with the final thing. All right, the final thing is, out of the 5 things that I learned from hosting a moderately successful hobby podcast. To recap, actually, let me do the recap after the 5th one. Is It sounds silly, but it has to be fun, or you have to love it. There's so much rigidity in the hobby. There's so much structure. There's so much. I love that there is no hierarchy. That there is no. I mean, it would be better if there were just some more guardrails, or some more, maybe regulation in place, because there is that gambling aspect of the hobby. But I just feel like, when, especially social media, or like people commenting or criticizing each other, there's like, you know I know I've made posts where I'm having fun, or there's this one where people really hated it. It's like I'm ripping prism packs while in the car. It's like people like trying to say that's stupid or ridiculous, and it's like, just, was it Cage, like, let him have fun, or just let him be. Just there's just so much rigidity. There's so much structure, and I think that's what I love about the hobby. Is it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to not be structured. Again, it would be nice to have some more, maybe, guardrails for people who are just kind of going off the deep end, or so that they do not go off the deep end, especially with, like, draining their bank accounts to get into these breaks or whatever. But this podcast here too, this whole Card Diary by Hobbyist Thompson, I just felt that it's good to have a theme or hook, but it also really kind of locked me in. Like, I could only talk about this particular subset of people in the hobby, because I'm talking about this chapter. There were many times where I was like, I would, on DMs and Instagram, I would love to talk to this person, or someone's like, I would love to be on, please have me on. It's like, well, when I get to that chapter, or when I get to talking about that, I'll have you on. Or and then, the weeks and months pass by, and then they're not on the podcast. And um maybe for me, it was just having too much rigidity, too much structure. And um I think maybe that also is what led to the burnout, and why it got to be less fun. So I think that what I've learned, and I'm still learning this, which is I I really want to keep this about having fun in the hobby. So going forward, if I have people on, I almost titled this episode "The End of Hobby S. Thompson," the end of the card diary, because it was just so rigid that I just felt kind of like locked in, and like that I couldn't be flexible and fluid, especially with other people's schedules and their desire to be on. So, I'll think about how I want to name this title, or name the title of this episode. But yeah, there is a part of me that's just like I started losing the sense of fun with the podcasting, with the social media, with the hobby. It did get to be too much, the D word, drama. I know I've been called dramatic. I know that also, I also know that that's life. Life is a dramedy, it's comedy, it's drama. But I know that I live an entertaining life, and there's things that happen to me. I think ultimately, if people say my content is dramatic, it's that I just share what happens in my life, and I just happen to have a pretty interesting or entertaining life, in the sense that things happen to me, and I just happen to share that out to people. And I think that's what people appreciate, is like I just share with my social media following what happens to me. And there are some people who would never say how much they made or lost on a card, or how good or bad a show was. And they just keep it to themselves, or they just tell their wives or their friends, and they don't share that on social media. For me, I've said that the hobby is my hobby. It's this content creation, the podcasting, the sharing. When I think about why I wanted to come back into the hobby, it's because I missed the community, the kinship, the camaraderie. Because, much as you can love your support system, your closest friends and families, um, there's a there's certain things that the hobby can provide or give you that they can't. And I think when I say that, I think that may resonate most with the listener who is the middle-aged man. Like, you can have a very fulfilling life outside of the hobby, but there's just something about being in this hobby that hooks you. That's why I say you come for the cardboard and you stay for the people. I think there's, especially if you're a man, a middle-aged man, I don't know what it is about women. They just make friendships so much easier and better as adults than I think men do. And I know I'm very much stereotyping and generalizing here, but that's just been a thought that's been in the back of my mind, especially with me coming back into the hobby, because it was like, not that I would not that I thought I would never come back, but I definitely had one foot out. Like, I I was like, is it worth coming back into? And I realized, yeah, I miss this. I really do. I miss just creating. I really don't like the word content. I really like making short form social media video and posts, and just engaging, and positively. Like, the negatives, the drama, the trolling, that's sucks and it's terrible. But I really like the engaging with the community of like-minded collectors. And then when it comes to long form, the audio, and I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, the video, I love this. I really just love talking into a microphone. I much would rather talk with a guest. So I'm hoping that the next several, not just the next episode, but the next several, and maybe going forward, every single episode being kind of, well, maybe not every single, but many more episodes having guests on. Because, thank you for listening to me for almost 45 minutes, but it's a long time to talk monologue. I don't even know how those radio hosts, and like, Stephen A. or Colin Coward, like these people, who is it, Pat McAfee. I guess they at least have people who they kind of riff off of, or their little, their teams. But people who talk for a really long time by themselves, it is it it is impressive, I guess, is one way to put it. But it's hard. It also is really hard. So I think I'm gonna end it there. So to recap in a way, one, you have to start somewhere. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Everyone starts at zero. Two, you are beholden to the podcasting platform of your choice. Three, you have to not you have to be, but it would be good and to set yourself up for success to be comfortable and focused during the podcasting. And the fourth is kind of like a 4A, 4B, which is just kind of like, having a hook or a theme, something to grab people's attentions in this attention economy. And yeah, whether it's podcasting or anything else, when you get good at something, for the people who are lacking the inner confidence to lift you and others up with themselves, you do become a threat to those folks. So just I think maybe 4B, a better way to put it is to not have a scarcity mentality and to try to develop or to nurture this abundance mentality or mindset. I think would be really good. So that's what I've learned is, and I'm learning myself again too, because I have definitely fallen into the traps of FOMO or being jealous, and I'm like, you know what, why, like, we're not competing against each other. We can all just increase the pie and just all do well together. And then the final thing is it has to be fun. And that one is it is a must. It is a mandatory because I don't know if you're not having fun, I don't know why you're doing any podcasting, anything in the hobby. Again, the hobby is supposed to be fun. It is supposed to be a place. It's supposed to be an escape. We're supposed to enjoy each other's company or our cards and your collection. It just it shouldn't be a source of so much stress and anger and just kind of like this seething rage or whatever that people go through. Like, we're supposed to come in here and leave all the stuff outside, that do stress us out. And when we're looking at the cardboard and we're engaging with people talking about the cardboard, it has to be fun. So this podcast, I really am going to aspire to have more fun with it. This, I guess, did end up kind of being a serious episode, but also I really enjoyed making it. There's a lot of thoughts that I had about this episode that I've wanted to put out in form. So before we hit that 50-minute mark, I'm going to just say thank you so much for listening. Again, you could be listening to any podcast in the world, but you're here with me or you're watching on YouTube. I really appreciate that. And let's just continue to grow the pie. Let's just continue to have fun and let's just be good to each other. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much. And until next time, take care.